Welcome to Surround Presents, the podcast where we showcase absolutely everything the Surround Podcast Network has to offer. And today, we're looking at Clever, hosted by Amy Devers. Clever's a window into the humanity behind the world around us. In each episode, designer Amy Devers has candid and revealing conversations with the visionaries, culture makers, and creative forces who shape our world and inform our society. In the Clever episode we're looking at today, Amy speaks with Alma Jimenez Lopez on art, heritage, and home. You can find more episodes of Clever at surroundpodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure while you're exploring more to take a look at everything the Surround Podcast Network has to offer. Because if you like this episode, we know you're going to like our entire roster.
Representation matters in the storytelling and showing up in places that we aren't normally in and being uncomfortable with being uncomfortable.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Devers, and this is Clever. Today, I'm talking to interior designer, fine artist, and curator, Alma Jimenez Lopez. A first-generation Mexican-American, Alma splits her time between her hometown of Abilene, Texas, and San Francisco, where she earned a BFA in Interior Architecture and Design from the Academy of Art University. Alma's career started in interior design at Studio O+A. She then took her talents to the furniture dealership MG West. During the pandemic, when everyone was out of work, she teamed up with Elizabeth Wirt to co-found Additions, an interior design studio focused on experiential design and community activations. Additions did so well that within a year, it was acquired by Canoa, where Alma took on the role of head of creative and brands. And by the way, this chapter includes a great story with Federico Negro, who you may remember from Clever episode 219. These days, Alma is the co-creator, along with Sergio Mondragon, of Threads, a new art and design curatorial collective. Their recent curated group show, El Liston Café, The Brown Ribbon, highlights a spectrum of personal narratives of Mexican Americans in California through art, design, and fashion. As Of Threads states, it's a way of saying we are here, we belong, and our stories matter. As you'll hear, Alma's commitment to her community, determination and creativity in the face of crises, whether that's COVID or the new administration's policies affecting immigrants and marginalized communities, is inspiring and deeply moving. She's a force, a bridge builder, a voice for the voiceless, and a powerful ray of light. Here's Alma.
My name is Alma Jimenez Lopez, and I am from Abilene, Texas, and I currently reside in Texas, but I also spend half my time here in San Francisco, which is really where I had my career. I'm an artist, I'm a designer, I'm a culture curator and, activist, and I really love to just bridge between cultures, communities, and disciplines. So really that's who I am as a person. And I think, Alma as a brand, it's really focusing on making good design accessible to everyone in the interiors design industry.
Thank you for that. I love a good bridge builder. That's that's my favorite. I think all of the really fertile and exciting stuff happens in the gray areas that haven't had the bridges built yet.
Yes.
So I'd love to understand how you got to be the way you are by going all the way back to ground zero. Can you talk to me about your childhood and your cultural background?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I'm from Abilene, Texas, which is a small town outside of Dallas, Fort Worth. I'd say about 2 hours west of it. Both my parents are from Mexico. They're from Guanajuato. But they came to the States in the late 70s, early 80s. And Abilene is the first place that they had come to. So really, again, born and raised there. It's definitely a blend of a community there where predominantly white, but there obviously was a heavy presence of Mexicans there. So it was, I feel like that whole upbringing was so special just in general because it's Texas. So I feel like I love the culture of Texas in the sense of, like the cowboy, like for Mexicans, it's very like the Tejano culture, which is really deep part of my roots, but beautiful place to really grow up in, but small nonetheless, right? as I started to jump into like how I got to San Francisco, around 18 years old was when I look back and I have no idea what made me pick San Francisco or California. I just knew that I always wanted to come to California, decided to come to the Academy of Art here in San Francisco. And interestingly enough, I really didn't grow up around art, which is interesting to think of because I appreciated interior design, but I feel like I learned a skill, right? I learned a skill of being able to, work in AutoCAD, do 3D renderings and things like that. So I think it's just a testament to just the drive and I think the ambition that I had of really trying to find something that I was really good at. And I think with interior design and in hindsight, now that I look back at it, probably one of the upbringings of growing up as a first generation American for my family is that early on, like I always just kind of had to be the person that had to translate or go with my parents to the doctor's appointments. And, as like a child, you think about it, like, how was I 5 or 6 years or, this like 7, 8-year-old age and like having these full blown conversations. And I know I'm jumping around a bit because I'm trying to get to the point of that it's something that I never realized was a superpower because I have the capabilities to see people that don't have voices or that need help in that form, right? And I say that because that's no wonder I'm successful as an interior designer because I understand clients. I understand their needs. I can just intuitively and empathetically like feel what they need. And I think that's why my career has been so successful in the design industry and why like just something powerful that I think I just realized recently that it's actually not a painful thing. It's actually the thing that makes me who I am, right? And I say that because it's like, as a child, like we're supposed to be curious and like kids and play around, but I definitely was really an adult at a young age because I had a lot of responsibilities, which I think is a common thread for a lot of first Americans, not just Mexican, but in general, like first American generations.
I've heard that before. So I'm aware that there is a lot of responsibility and that because you have to become an adult so early, your childhood almost gets stretched out. Do you find now as an adult that you seek out like sort of childlike joys?
Absolutely. Yes. I think I've just always been like a child. And I think even with my interior design, there have always been like very bold colors. I remember designing a company's headquarters and I had like hot pink in there. I had like, it was just like these, really eccentric colors, but I didn't realize like how much like I was always in design and art was always trying to get back to that childhood that I didn't really get to have. Right.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I really want to go back to this superpower that you developed of being able to sense and intuit the needs of those who don't have a voice. I think that's really powerful. And I understand that your translation is not just language, right? It's translating unspoken into spoken. It's translating materiality into the needs of an environment or the needs of a human into the materiality of an environment. And, you said early on that you're a bridge builder. And I think a lot of times when you become attuned to the gaps that need bridging, you also develop this really keen sense of what's missing. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then as a creator, you take it upon yourself to design the thing that's missing. And that is how the world gets made. And that's how the world gets shaped. And you're a pioneer of that.
Yeah, it's definitely, again, recognizing that common thread. I feel like I've always known it, but I don't think I really understood how powerful that was until recently. And I think it had a lot to do with, like, as I mentioned, I moved to San Francisco as 18 and I just moved back to my hometown last year after spending half my life here, right? I grew up in San Francisco, absolutely. And to go back and, I bought my parents' old home.
Wow.
So I got to like go back into this childhood that I hadn't like existed in, which also is a lot of like childhood, healing that's happening, right? And, my parents obviously were still living at the house, but they ended up moving back late last year, back to Mexico. So it was like so much movement of like, they were like done. They retired. They're like, we're leaving. Like, we'd love for you to buy the house. And, so it was just like so much growth that happened, so much healing, so much just it explains why I also did Of Threads, which is, I mean, we can talk about that in a minute. There's just so many things that are so connecting at the moment, but what does it mean to inherit heritage? And I think with that, talking with my parents, really getting to know them as individuals and them getting to know me, I think just was so powerful in being an adult around them, right? And I know it's a privilege to do that.
It is a privilege, and it's also a brand new relationship in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And the adult parent-child relationship can be very essential and healing. The baggage of childhood, none of us escape it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all relative, but the job of adulthood, I think, is reconciling with all of that and understanding your maladaptive coping mechanisms.
Yes.
And trying to maybe redesign those so that they serve everyone a little better. But I want to know specifically about you, like what type of healing occurred in this last year with your parents and with this inheritance of heritage. And I also want to know how you connect to Mexico.
I think with my parents, like the healing that happened was existing in the childhood home that I grew up in, that obviously has amazing memories, but also has that, like, what I used to feel was a burden of like, okay, I'm back here and I was such an adult as a child here, and reconnecting with them and having dialogues of, I think it's not just a first generational thing, but I think when you have immigrant parents, it's like you have a hard time setting up boundaries. And I think for me, I was really setting boundaries within them. And I think I always thought that we couldn't understand each other because they speak heavy Spanish. They can speak English to a degree, but, they can't read or write in English, right? So there's already a disconnect there in that form. And, because I moved away when I was 18, it's almost like I also removed myself a little bit from speaking Spanish, because there's so much of like the assimilation that like I, with really being Mexican American, of like, I'm Mexican when I'm with my family, but then I'm American when I'm not around them. And I think like for like first time in my life, moving back to Texas, I had the space to really like get in tune with myself. And I think that's a lot of the healing that happened, where, again, I didn't think I could talk to my parents about certain things. But when I did start talking to them about like just, a bit of the trauma that I've experienced with them, they were so like open. They wanted to know more. They were so curious. And
oh, that's really wonderful. That's not always the case.
It really blew me away, because I just, for whatever reason, I thought in my mind they couldn't understand me, but we just found a common thread to have a dialogue,
That's glorious. I love to hear that. And I can imagine, I'm going to rely on you to tell me because I don't have the same lived experience, but cultural duality, is a theme that you explore in your work, in your curatorial work, and in your fine art practice, and in your life. And this idea of being Mexican with your family, and when you're in San Francisco, you're not. And is there a part of the healing that also involved you sort of overlapping, bringing together the Mexican and the American of Alma?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think within Mexican culture, and it's clearly not every Mexican part of a Mexican family, but there's a lot of machismo that exists in our culture. And I say that because that was really a lot of the experience that I had of, my dad worked on an oil rig, which that's already hard in itself, right? And my mom worked at a cleaner. So they both had these, hard labor jobs that were just, they're already tired from like working those jobs, and then to come home and to really rely on like I'm not the oldest, which is really surprising because everyone thinks I'm the oldest. I have an older sister. I have two little brothers, but for whatever reason, I think I was just the one that was more like in tune and probably less rebellious. So I think my sister was probably the more rebellious because it was very controlling, very like, we couldn't stay at people's houses. We like couldn't really like hang out with like our friends. It was very like a strict household. And I think that was just because my parents worked so much. They were trying to protect us, I just felt like I paid attention to my parents in that form. But, that was really the dialogue that we had of, you guys put a lot of weight on me, and like, I'm trying to express that it's like not healthy, how I was treated. Right. And I think it took them a while to understand because they're like, but, you're the strong one. Like, you're the one that like, we don't have to worry about. And I feel like when they would, we would talk about it, I would just get so emotional, and I'm like, but it doesn't mean that I'm not tired. Right. So it was just this, and to be like, my parents getting emotional as well. And they're just like, I didn't realize that that's what we were doing, because they also like, come from leaving their families as well at a young age. So all they know is like a survival. So they also put the same survival on us. Right. So I think to be able to like have the opportunity to talk about it and them seeing that and then immediately going into a parent mode where my mom, was like checking up on me. I could see my mom trying to like do these nurturing things as I lived in the house. And, even my dad too, like he would see me outside, like building my studio, and he'd come out and he'd like pull a chair and he's like, you sit there, I'll do it for you. And we just like sat there, and my dad's building this furniture for me, just having this like surreal, like, this is what was supposed to happen. This is how, so I think that's why it gets like emotional to think about it, but like how powerful to have that moment where I thought could never exist, but actually got to exist before they headed back to Mexico.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly reminded that life experience is so nonlinear, and it's almost like a disservice to think that childhood happens only when we're young.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
I'm so glad you had that moment. And I'm sure for your parents too, it was probably really healing for them to be able to participate in your life in that way and understand you on that level,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I realized that because my parents also don't have the words to express what they're doing, it was also like teaching them what those words were. So it was like we were being parents to each other. And there was also a time, and I'm going to try this without getting emotional because it's like, it's so powerful when I think about it. But when my dad retired, when I first got back last year, I could tell my dad didn't know what to do with himself because he's just been working in this field for a very long time. And me and my sister were like, why don't you go to like school? Because they do like specifically for Spanish speaking adults, and they like go through a whole process. And I was like, let's sign you up. So we signed my dad up, and we're like, watching my dad go to school and like come home with these like papers that would be like, write milk in a sentence, and like he would get graded and it would be like A+, or like, you did great, Augustine. Like, to see my dad actually live his life as a child too and like go through school, my dad would come home, he's like, look, like, can you read what it said? And it was just like, again, the most powerful thing to just experience. It just felt like I was in a totally different parallel dimension because he got to learn how to write, and he got to learn how to speak a language. And so late, obviously he's older, in his 70s, but it was such a beautiful, like, I know he completely healed a part of his childhood. And I think that's like, just opening up more to us, and like, again, seeing us more as like his daughters. And I just I picture my dad in front of me, like just his smile and how happy he was.
That is so beautiful. I mean, it's such a testament to like the power of language, but also the power of learning and the willingness to resume a childhood that was interrupted, but also the willingness to learn from the child.
Mm-hmm.
And reciprocate, that whole knowledge exchange in a way that doesn't have a hierarchy of experience or age attached to it.
Yeah.
But this idea of what it means to inherit heritage feels like it could be a very daunting responsibility, and yet it could also feel like continuing to weave a very sort of generational tapestry that you now get to contribute your own knowledge, hand and body. So I want to hear all about it. It just and maybe you can walk me through your career and talk about how this is playing out.
So when I moved here to San Francisco, I was very fortunate when I graduated was 2010, which obviously was still in the recession. And we were all trying to get jobs, obviously my whole little group of friends. And I tell this story because I am very persistent. And I think it's also just because of all the adversity that I had to obviously, deal with at a young age, that when people tell me no, it's like, I'm going to get in there. Like, I know that I'm going to do it. I'm just going to keep going. I feel like if anything, when people tell me no, it does the opposite of discouragement. It makes me just, again, more passionate to get through. And, we're all trying to get jobs. And I had applied to this studio that is really well renowned now, but at the time was kind of in the beginning stages, but was really a big fan of them. Their Studio Passe in San Francisco. And I had applied for the job, and I know Verda will not kill me, but I had, she's one of the founders of the studio, and I applied for the job and they didn't accept me the first time. And she's like, but sorry, we chose somebody else, but stay in touch, And I was like, I'm going to get in there. And I remember applying again. And then she's like, sorry, Alma, we still don't, we decided to go somewhere else. And I remember just I think that was the first time where I felt, if I don't find a job or I get this job, I'm going to have to move back to Texas. And that just wasn't an option for me, And then I applied the third time and ended up getting into the studio. And it was just supposed to be an internship for 3 months doing 3D work. And obviously, I killed it at what I did, because when I do something, it just really go hard. I become very obsessed with the things that I'm doing, and I will do my 10,000 hours. So I feel like the first, month I had, was working on some pretty big tech company projects, and I probably spent 16 hours every day, because I knew that I just had to work harder. I had to work harder to stay here, to get a full-time job. I think this is also with the representation. I was a person of color in that studio, right? And, again, it's just always harder, because you always have to just double work. And so ended up getting a full-time position shortly a month after. And then obviously that was such a pivotal point for me, because that's when I got to really hone in my skills of listening to clients, really understanding them, and then getting the chance to design their spaces, because, obviously we're listening to the clients, but we're building spaces for the engineers, for all different departments. And I really enjoyed the research part of getting to interview all the end users. So I felt like that was it was like a puzzle to me. I love to understand what they don't have, and how do I meet those needs. And I think that's really where that superpower that, I felt was such a burden in the beginning of my life actually came to the first time experiencing it in its full potential, of seeing people that often get overlooked or not really getting a say in what they want.
That's so amazing to recognize that too. It's like you have a power tool on your belt, but you just found the on switch, and you're like, oh shit, now I know how to use this thing.
Exactly.
So just for our listeners, you were doing new construction interior design?
Yeah, it was commercial interiors. And particularly what I ended up becoming such a fan of was the furniture part. And that's where I became the FF&E, which is furniture, finishes, and fixtures abbreviation. But that's when I really became the guru for that. And I think it was just all the parts of, okay, how does this chair look in this space and this color it was just something that I just really enjoyed putting together. I was doing interior architecture for, I'd say, a good 8 years. And it just became my whole world. So yeah, after those 8 years, I ended up going to a furniture dealership where, I really got to step more into that and build their creative team. That was at MG West in San Francisco. So we were doing huge accounts and again, the opportunity came to lead a department and build it. So I got to first taste of, again, building something from nothing and hiring the right people and built a really well-rounded team. Because I had always loved to build. So it was nice to kind of transition and like, what can Alma do as like taking all of that and really transform what that industry is. And I have to say, I do really feel that I did make an impact of that, because dealerships aren't really looked at as like, design forward thinking. And I think it's because they're kind of like the end thought of a project. So I feel like for me, the exciting challenge of it was how, now that I'm building this team there and changing the design perspective for that dealership, how do I connect with interior designers? And that's where the bridge came again, right? Where
yes.
I became this bridge of like, I'm an interior designer as well, and I understand what you're looking for. Like, this is how we can work together with furniture. And I feel like I did that with so many big interior design companies and just connected them with this dealership that I was at. So it was, again, first taste of being able to build a team and then becoming a bridge again, which was really exciting.
From the skill of doing the actual interior architecture and the specifying and the FF&E to the skill of being a leader and building a team, a really well-rounded team, and then taking that team into areas that traditionally they hadn't gone with dealerships as an industry. I'm wondering, like, as you're evolving through this and achieving so much, you're growing your confidence, I assume, and it's also probably expanding your horizons in terms of like, hey, what can I do with this force that is Alma, with this superpower that is, seeing the invisible and knowing how to translate it into the real?
Yeah, being at the furniture dealership, I started to expand so much more into furniture. And not only was I building those bridges, but I then started to get the attention of these furniture brands, because my whole job too, aside from building a team and designing and being able to connect, I was also supposed to research and find new brands and brands that aren't in the US, finding them. So I actually got to travel to Copenhagen and like Milan and all these places to find manufacturers to bring them to the US and connecting that. And I feel like that was the first time where I was like, oh my God, like I am actually helping these brands come to the US market and break them in. And I started to get more attention from these brands, and they would actually start asking me to give them feedback on product development. So all of a sudden it just opened this huge gate of, that whole understanding and bridging that I just didn't realize how great I was at it and how much I excelled at it. So yeah, to answer your question of the confidence, I think it's just something that builds.
Yeah.
When I first started there, I obviously, I get imposter syndrome here and there. And it's just because, you're showing up in a new space. Like, also the other part of it too is I was grateful to have a few mentors. But I think for me, because I just had this thought in my mind, I just don't like to bother people. So I never really asked for help, So then I'm just like,
I relate.
Right? Where you're just,
Yeah.
I'm just like, I feel like I should ask somebody. Just like, I'll figure it out myself. And I think that's where the imposter syndrome would come, because it's like, I didn't have an outlet to talk to somebody. But I think in hindsight, it helped me just be confident in myself that it's okay. Like, just keep moving. Like, you're doing something right, because you're clearly bringing business. You're clearly connecting these brands and helping them come to the US. Like, just keep on that path, right? So I loved my time there. And really the only reason I had left was COVID happened. Obviously, that's when everything changed for all of us. But I think for me, that was the first time to really see how nobody really knew what they were doing. And I say that not to be like a bad thing. I say it of like, if I wanted to do and branch out and do something on my own, now is probably the time to do it. And something inside me wanted to build something of my own, because connection and community have always been a big part of my life. It's obviously part of our culture too. Like in Mexican American culture, it's like we're a unit. We're a completely unit, and I always bring that to my work. And I feel like for once, I just wanted to do it for myself. And, I was actually chatting with a friend who was also doing the same thing I was doing at a dealership. And, it always happens every time you get me on drinking some wine and I have music and have too many bottles.
I want to be there. I want to.
Yeah. I think the joke is amongst my friends that have started their own businesses. They're like, whenever you get out of a drunk, you're going to start a business. That day you're going to start a business, because she will make you open up get your domain. And, and that's what happened with Liz and myself, my partner. We founded Additions in 2021. And we really wanted to focus on experimental design and community activations, because again, as I said, COVID had happened and I really felt it very hard. All these brands that I helped connect to the US and, my friends that were in the furniture making business locally. And I remember just feeling this despair of like, all these beautiful brands, like, what are they going to do? It's COVID. How are we going to sell furniture? How are we going to deal with all this? And my really good friend, who's a furniture maker in Oakland, she had called me. She's like, Alma, I just signed a lease and there's no work. Like, what am I going to do? And I remember being so emotional about it. And I think that's really why this conversation with Liz had happened, because we were trying to connect ourselves, even though we were competitors. We were trying to have a dialogue of like, how do we support our community? Because this isn't just affecting us as our companies, it's affecting this entire industry. And if San Francisco leads with tech companies and buildings and no one's coming to the office, like, this is really shutting everything down. So Liz and I, again, one night just, had a bunch of bottles of wine and decided to, again, open Additions. And, we really followed through. And this is why I appreciate Liz so much, because she's the same as me. And we just both let's do it. So we ended up quitting our job 2021.
Wow.
In May of 2021. And we posted an Instagram post and immediately were called. And I think it's because both Liz and I had really made a name for ourselves in the furniture design industry. And again, time is everything. And I think this is where my intuition has always paid off for me in leaving when I feel like it's time to leave or grow. Obviously, nobody was doing interiors, and obviously everything was backed up. Nobody was getting permits. So the only thing people could do was do flexible work, and that was moving furniture. And obviously, I had spent the last 4 years finding local, manufacturers, being able to buying used furniture. And Liz and I we just got busy. All of a sudden, we were working with Palo Alto Networks called, LinkedIn called, these tech companies that are like, hey, we want to think about what the future workplace is, and we need, designers to help with flexible space. And we just got busy. So
yes. So that's one thing that was an outgrowth of COVID, is the future of the workspace, which has been a contextual conversation for years now, but you were right there at the inception, at ground zero of what's the future of the workplace.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Timing is everything.
Everything. I know. And we were brokering deals. We had no idea what that we were doing brokering. We were just like, oh yeah, we're building this company. They have used furniture. I think you guys should just swap furniture because you want something new. So again, we just got busy. And at the same time, because we said we never wanted to work for tech. Obviously, we took the work because we had focused on creating a community exhibition, which was called Temporarily Available, that took place in Berkeley in October. And that was when I really think we, in some ways started to revitalize San Francisco design, because again, it was us gathering 12 Bay Area artists and spotlighting them. So obviously in the mix of doing this work for these companies and rethinking what workplace meant, we also were doing community activations.
I mean, this also sounds like the first official curatorial position. You're kind of a de facto curator when you're FF&E.
Yes.
And it sounds like you've always had this pull towards the curatorial, because it is about community and connection.
Exactly.
And it is about giving voice and platform to those who need it.
Yeah.
I also just want to call out the This Is America exhibit at Alcova at Salone
I'm so glad you're
in
bringing that up.
2022.
Yes. Interesting enough, there's so many connections here. I was on Instagram and really trying to find community, and I saw a post from Hello Human, which is a PR agency. And because I saw that Instagram post about community, and they actually had this democratizing what PR was, and where there was a pay system that like supports based on your needs. And that's how we got connected to Halo Human, and I reached out to Jenny, incredible PR agency. And they got the opportunity to show up in Milan, Salone. And this was all kind of happening at the end of 2021 when we had just did our first activation in Berkeley, which using their method, we actually got, had press on Design Milk and Sight Unseen, which was insane to us because that's like, to the first time to get acknowledged on those publications was like huge. Yeah. So thankful for them in helping us support us as a small business. But yeah, that was when the opportunity came. And at that same time in October is actually when we met Federico Negro, who is from Kanoa. And he heard of us because one of our advisors to Editions knew Kanoa and told us, hey, you should check out this platform because you guys are doing FF&E. They strictly focus on FF&E and you should use them. So we actually were Kanoa's first users to really fully use them on projects where, again, we were designing these 20, 50,000 square foot spaces using the platform. And that's how we, so again, it's like all this was happening at the same time. So yeah, so knowing that we met Fed in September, and then October had the activation in Berkeley, and then got that opportunity, we ended up submitting to Milan and got in. And this is where like we were like, oh my God, like how is this a thing? And really going in based on This Is America being underrepresented, artists and designers. And for the first time, which is crazy to think that Milan had never had a full American show up in Milan.
Yeah.
Which is 2020, like 2021, 2022, like to not have that dialogue and narrative. And that was so important to all of us. And we were so excited to have it. But with that said, we were so excited about it, but then realizing, okay, well, we need money to fund this. And this is where Federico came in, because obviously we're avid users. We talked to him and his team, probably once a week. We were like getting our sponsor deck ready, and we were like, we're users of your platform and just wanted to ask if maybe you want to sponsor us to like go to Milan. We got this opportunity. Fed is just like, well, how much do you need? And I'm like, it's like the space we want is $50,000, but like, we'll take whatever you could give. And Fed immediately was just like, I'll pay for the whole thing. And we were like, what? He's
oh
like,
my God,
awesome.
Really?
Yes. So
I knew I liked him.
Noah paid for us to be at that show, and that is why we got to be there. It would not have been possible without Fed supporting and saying how important it was. He's like, what you guys are doing is good work and you need to keep going. And like, if I can do this, absolutely. And I was like, did that just happen? We just like we don't have to worry about anything else. And he's like, go do it. Go build what you need to build. And we just, again, became very, very close with him. And, obviously with that, we started pouring into each other, Kanoa and Editions. And he would then start to, give us work, because obviously people would reach out to him and say, oh, we need an interior design company. And like, oh, Editions. And we definitely got work from him. We also started bringing work to him. And I think what I feel like just became so close after was in December, we had the opportunity to pitch Kanoa on a project and millions of dollars, and ended up flying to New York with our client, got a meeting with Kanoa, and I was like, okay, guys, like, this is it. Like, we've been rooting for you guys. It's like, now it's your time to present. And, after the presentation, the client decided to proceed with Kanoa and us. So it was a huge win. And I think that was the first time they had gotten a big deal like that. And, I think that just made us tighter. And obviously him supporting us at Kanoa, it just felt like the perfect relationship that we were growing together. We were supporting each other. And I'd say shortly after, again, we were drinking again. Fed came out to visit us in January. And again, this is only 9 months of us being open. We were busy. We were just, all this was happening. We're hanging out at Cottage Grill, famous San Francisco spot, lovely martinis. And I say that because we had a lot of them. And me, Federico, and Liz. And just at the end of the night, I say this story because it's very, very to my heart, grabbed my hand, Liz there, and he's just like, I just want you to know how incredible you guys are and how like this is just like the best team, and I want you guys to come over. Would you guys want to come over and lead the creative team for Kanoa? Like, let's make good design accessible to everyone. What you guys are doing is like huge. And like, I don't even realize if you guys understand the impacts that you're making on a local scale. Let's do it together on a global scale. And that was the start of our journey with Kanoa. Yeah.
I love it. That's like the best love story of all time. Yeah. I'm like swooning over here for everybody involved.
Yeah. So, again, 9 months of it, I'm like, Liz, did we just get acquired by a tech company? Which was not our plan at all, because in the beginning we had said fuck tech because we didn't want to work there anymore. And then now we were coming over. But we moved really fast and ended up coming on board 2022 in March. And, at the same time, we still had so many things happening with Editions because we had the Milan show that we were doing. And then we had also got asked by New Zealand brands, 6 of them, to also help them come to the US market. So we had that exhibition happening during SF Design Week. There was just, again, bridging that bridge. We just became very well known to do that. And we're just being asked by lots of brands to be able to help them break into the market. So yeah, I say those because those were very pivotal and important to us.
Yeah.
And obviously, the Milan show had no idea. None of us had any idea how amazing and incredible that show is going to be. But it just goes to show you how representation matters and these things matter, and the storytelling and showing up in places that I don't want to say we're not supposed to, but showing up in places that we aren't normally in and being uncomfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's also I don't think America has, since the mid-century, hasn't really asserted a design perspective. And it's hard to categorize what is American design when it's so diverse, right? And it's so multicultural because America is a nation of immigrants. And so as a curator, I really respect that challenge. It is, how do we represent what This Is America is? And at the same time, America very much has a voice and should be speaking in these design epicenters and expressing its perspective. So that show was also as an educator and somebody who supports designers and wants to launch them into the world, I was so grateful for that and so excited about it. And I also felt yeah, that's us.
Yeah.
We're speaking there in Milan. That's fucking fantastic.
Yeah. I feel like it made us all very proud of being American, especially because obviously we're dealing with a certain administration at that point. And I think we all were what is America? But I think it really brought a lot of us back to really, this is why we love America, because we get the opportunities to express ourselves and to show up. And really, America it will always be, regardless of any administration, a place of dreams, right? Because you can really do anything, right? And I say that because so much, again, adversity in my life, but also so many successes. And you had asked me earlier, when I started working at MG West, did I start feeling confident? It was almost when I started to open that door of being a bridge and understanding that, everything just started to align, and very quickly. So it felt really good again to show up in Milan and be a voice for people that don't have a voice, and also show up as a unit, because again, it's one of the quotes that Jenny said from Hello Human, where she said, "A tide moves all boats." And I think that's so true, right? Where it's one of us moves, we all move together. And I think there's such a beauty in showing up as like hard as it feels, as like the imposter syndrome that feels, it's like somebody is watching, people are listening. And the common thread too is I keep building tables for myself because they don't exist. And it's like,
and you need a seat at them.
Yeah, I need a seat at them. And I was like, well, you know what? Do you want to sit at my table? And I think that's so, and again, it goes to, going back to the superpower where if I didn't speak up for my parents at a young age, they weren't going to get what they needed. And I think that's why I never had this feeling that I couldn't ask, like, at least when I showed up, right? Like showing up and then I'd be like, okay, like I just feel like I always had conviction when I like really did show up. I'm like, okay, no, where is this? And I think that's really why I probably moved quickly, because it's just like, once I'm in that state of mind, like I think mountains do start to move, because it's like, we got to keep it moving.
Yeah. No, I love that. Keep building tables for yourself and then invite other people to sit at your table.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I feel like Kanoa is a huge chapter of your life, and now you're on a new chapter. You're a curator and a fine artist, co-founded of Threads, which is a curatorial collective focusing on Mexican-American artists. And you're also the founder of your own multidisciplinary creative studio. So can you talk to me about your current endeavors and what that looks like? And I really just want to start off by giving you my deepest appreciation for the El Liston Cafe exhibit. There's something so generous about its format, and I've only seen it in photos. I wish I could actually be in this space, because I can see all of those objects just vibrating with such a depth of cultural and heritage energy and embodied wisdom that comes through their hands in the craft of it. But also the format is so intimate, and it's such an act of hospitality to invite us into that sort of living room-esque kind of space, as opposed to this deliberately sort of cold white box.
Yeah.
I love everything about it, and it makes me want to camp there for a long time.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. So of Threads, it's just currently what my focus is right now is something myself and Sergio Mondragon, we're both Mexican American, have really talked about doing for a very long time, for years. And of Threads is a curatorial art collective by Sergio and myself that is surrounded about Mexican American perspectives. And really, of Threads came from the thread that binds us all together, right? And not just within our culture, with obviously like weaving and those things are connected to us. And ironically, Sergio and I didn't realize that our families are actually 1 hour away from each other. So his family is also from Guanajuato. So yes, so the connection is like really, this is where synchronicities, and I'm a very spiritual person in the universe, and to just kind of see those synchronicities happen. He's also Christian, but yeah, it just felt the right time. And again, clearly we had no idea that this administration that's currently in now was going to be in office. I don't think any of us really thought that. So the fact that we're showing up at this specific time, which is timing is everything. And again, the intuition, what we're doing right now just feels so important. And again, of Threads, the collective, and El Liston Cafe is the exhibition. And El Liston is the brown ribbon, right? And, really much like Threads, it really holds true to our mission, which is to weave together our Mexican American identities into something cohesive and undeniable, right? And ribbons really carry a lot of deep cultural significance, whether it's like braids in our hair, whether it's like for celebrations, for just really a part of our culture. And the cafe obviously is brown, which really speaks directly to our skin, our identity, and just at this time right now, how we're, frequently marginalized. And I think it was just really important for us to create a show that highlights these artists, and by also still sticking with our, identities of being Mexican and American, as we've talked earlier, how they really exist sometimes and do different roles. And we really wanted to blend, like, what is that gray area? And that's the area that, we want to live in and be in, where let's not focus on the differences and like what actually binds us together. So that's really the connection of the ribbon and the thread.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's amazing. I think also one of the most powerful and effective ways to dispel toxic narratives and stereotypes is through artistic authenticity, personal narratives, and vulnerability. And I just appreciate how powerful it can be to just be very intentional and expressive around that dual identity, that cultural inheritance, and to claim both your American side and your Mexican side together and proudly, and to also help others understand what that dual identity looks like, means, and feels, because you're not excluding people from that. You're inviting them into it.
Exactly. And I think that's really when you mention how we showed up here, because again, white cube gallery spaces have been a space for exclusion, and really like this experiencing art from detachment, neutrality, and like an intellectual distance, right? Where it's like, don't get too close to the art. And like for me, particularly, art for me has never been experienced like in that isolation, because I feel like art to me, our artifacts are the things we have in our home, right? The objects and things we use and the rituals we carry forward, which is why this conversation of how do we inherit heritage has been so predominant of like this show, because we really wanted to create an immersive setting where we reclaim a space that feels inherently ours, right? And stepping into our personal homes, which like I mentioned, last year I bought my parents' home, and I have a mix of my own belongings, but also my parents' belongings, right? Where, religion is a very big part of our culture, especially the Virgin Mary. My mom has a huge shrine with the Virgin Mary with lights and candles, and it's this altar. And I think mostly every single Mexican American home has an altar, because it's like something, even, I wanted to tell the story because it was funny. Before we got on this call, my mom called me and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Hey, I'm going to get on this call for interview. Like, don't call me right now." And she's like, "Well, what's it about?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to, chat about myself and like what I'm doing." And she's like, "Okay." She's like, "I'm glad I'm at home still. I'm going to light a candle for you." And I just started laughing, where it's like, it just continued. And it's like this faith, this blind faith of like, believe in what you're doing. And she gave me my affirmations, and she was just like, "You got the," and that was the only way my parents could communicate to me or support me, is by their words of affirmation and motivation, right? Because they don't know what it's like to work in a corporate, they don't know what this world is. All they have is their faith and belief that I can do something, and that is instrumental, right? Which is why these altars are so important in our culture. And what we really wanted to showcase in this show was that you feel us and you feel our existence. And like, it's a privilege to be able to pop up in San Francisco for this time, and to have all these artists that how it naturally came about, we're all saying the same narratives and creating art for themselves that they would like to have in their home, as well as like sharing it. So it feels like, again, the entry of the gallery is like your standard white, beautiful paintings and, ceramics and lighting. But in the back room is where we created this immersive experience. And I don't think we thought about it, but the back room was the one that was filled the most. Like, it's like nobody wanted to be in the front. Everybody wanted to be in the back. And it was like packed in there, Amy. I was just like, I can't even get through. And I'm like, they're just hanging out. They don't want to leave. And it was just, to me, just so eye-opening to feel that we really just did ourselves and showed up authentically, and everyone could feel it. And we even have a Virgin Mary in the back that's in this little shrine, and it has a photo of me and Sergio when we're little. And it's just like the most recorded thing, like just like people and it was just so emotional. I think for all of us, we were like, oh my God, like they loved to see us, and they got to see us in such a vulnerable place. And I think that's also why Sergio and I, obviously we're creators, but we also wanted to be in the show because we wanted everyone to feel that we were being vulnerable with them. And why we chose Glass Rice too, which is an important story, is we originally wanted to stay in the Mission in SF, which is a predominantly Mexican, a Latino area. But we were like, no, we need to show up in places we're not supposed to or feel like we can't. It's important to like not get comfortable. So this is why the, conversation collaboration with Glass Rice felt important and why they made a safe space for us. And it was just to see Mexican American design in Nob Hill in San Francisco. Everything about this show has been incredible, and I think has given all of us a lot of confidence to just show up in the way we are and that it's enough,
I love that. And I can't wait for where you show up next. Is there anything on the horizon that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, Sergio and I had a long conversation last Sunday about where we want to go. And I think with Of Threads, we want to continue to partner with galleries and want to be able to support their communities. So we have been looking at, New York with obviously New York is very heavy Latino culture in terms of Dominican, Puerto Rican, right? Like, I feel like less a Mexican. And I feel like we talked about what is it like to bring a Mexican American show to New York and show more of ourselves there. So really bringing like this West Coast there. And then there's also a conversation of Texas where we actually tap into like my heritage, which is Tejano, and like the vaquero culture, which is Mexican men and women that wear their cowboy hats. So it's this whole Mexican cowboy aesthetic that we want to tap into, especially to like tapping into obviously the cultural environment there now it's painful to see. And I actually have not been back to Texas since this administration has taken office. So I've only seen like the news of what's happening in my town. And I've been connecting with community leaders all over in Dallas and Austin. And it's just, this is why the work is so important and why like pushing to go to Texas is absolutely a place we want to show up, to just know that we're there to, that we're there to support and really that they're not forgotten. And, obviously with Mexican Americans that are there, but also trans and queer. And it's a very, very hard place to be right now for, people of color, but also just people that are different, So I think just shining light, I think we're just going to be a light to people and use the platform that we have, because it's certainly a privilege to be talking to you, but also continue to share our story and to just let them know that, we see them and we'll keep speaking, So again, I haven't been to Texas since then, so I've only seen the news, and a part of me has anxiety about it. And a lot of my friends were like, why don't you just stay here? And I'm like, because I don't help the problem. If anything, I should be there because I have the knowledge and I have the understanding and I have the platform, and I need to be a light for them at this moment. So that's really where, Texas is obviously cares so much about the Texas people, but it's just the state that's just getting hit like the hardest right now in terms of, a lot of these Midwest states. So it's important to do this work, and I'm, I don't want to say I'm not scared. I'm just showing up and doing as much as I possibly can with this platform. So
I honor what you're doing, and I'm so grateful that you shared it with me and that I get to be a little part of also refracting your light out into the world. I love how brave you are, and I just, whatever I can do to add batteries or fuel to your flame so you can keep shining that light.
Thank you.
It's important and it's super brave. And you have touched me so deeply. Thank you so much for just showing up with your full self here today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you making space and making this platform. And I'm here to support you too. So anything you need as well. But I'm so grateful for this opportunity.
I feel like emotional, but also in some ways that was like very beautiful. I loved sharing tears with you,
Thank
Alma.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to leave you sad. I feel like, can we make our next date like with all those martinis?
Yeah, absolutely, Amy. It's like, I think it's emotional because we feel it so much. It's just human decency. It's just being a human.
Yeah.
And the empath, and again, the superpower, it's like, I can be that voice, and I feel like I just feel their pain. I feel it all. But again, knowing that I can feel that pain and change it into something positive is what gives me the light, and why I shine the way I shine, and why I'm able to move mountains. And like, now more than ever, the way that I show up and what I'm doing, the work that I'm doing, is going to move this in some form. And whether it's like a 0.1%, it's something's going to move. And it is my mission to make sure that that happens.
I know it will. I know it will. You are a force.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah.
This has been so beautiful. Thank you so much, Alma.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. For a transcript of this episode and more about Alma, including links and images of her work, head to our website, cleverpodcast.com. While you're there, sign up for our free Substack newsletter, which includes news, announcements, and a bonus Q&A from our guests. If you like Clever, there are a number of ways you can support us. 1, you can complete our listener survey at the link in the description. 2, share Clever with your friends. Leave us a 5-star rating or a kind review. And 3, hit the follow or subscribe button in your podcast app so that our new episodes will turn up in your feed. We love to hear from you on LinkedIn and Instagram. You can find us at Clever Podcast, and you can find me at Amy Devers. Clever is hosted and produced by me, Amy Devers, with editing by Mark Zurawinski, production assistance from Alana Nevins and Anushka Stefan, and music by L1011. Clever is a proud member of the Surround Podcast Network. Visit surroundpodcasts.com to discover more of the architecture and design industry's premier shows.
Whatever you get out of a drunk, you're going to start a business.